This is part 2 of my Chook shed find. I'm going to tear down this engine and make it work. Alright, this morning I've started to disassemble the flywheel and sub-trans side of the motor, and I've just loaded everything up into the outer casing here. Everything came off relatively easily. A couple of big circlips held this gear on, and one of the dog clutch gears from the input shaft. So just circlips on those. Everything else lifted out. This is the starter sprocket, and the starter motor runs on that gear, and this gear here runs on the big gear here, which drives through the Sprag clutch to the flywheel itself, which is keyed to the crankshaft. This gear is all one piece. I've got the shim and things all with it, just sitting in here. It's this gearbox looks pretty black, but it's all material that's moving around. So I'll flip back over to here. That starter motor sprocket runs up here. The flywheel came off this taper. I don't think I actually showed the nut I put on the end of the crankshaft, used as a protector for the end of the crankshaft, and it's sort of, I tightened it down on there, and I can't actually remove that easily at the moment. It can stay there and continue to protect the thread. The key in this tapered section here is around this side. That's that taper that the flywheel has to pull off, and the nut that holds it down on there I've removed, and it's over there in my tin. This is that counter shaft pivot point. I'm not sure whether that wants to pull out or just, it does appear to be rocking around a bit, but I'm not sure whether that pulls out. I do suspect it probably can just pull out. This is the input shaft from the gearbox. The output shaft from the sub-trans here, and you can see through that hole there, this shaft must drive a big cog that's spinning there, which in turn spins the rear axle. So there must be 2 stages between here and the actual axle itself, which makes sense. You can, as you said, you can see that intermediate gear turning there. Because I'm turning this one clockwise and the rear axle, I'm turning this one clockwise and the rear axle's going anti-clockwise. That gear in the window there is meshing with this one, which this one's going clockwise, the one in the window there is going anti-clockwise, and the rear axle's going anti-clockwise. There must actually be another cog in the system, because for this one to be turning the same speed as the same direction as that one, there must be yet another cog in there somewhere. We'll suss that out later. So in terms of just diagnostics, there's some grey milkshake sludge here, which would indicate there's been a bit of water in here. There's no rust on anything, but there's some sludgy stuff kicking around in here. And in a couple of places it looked quite sort of rubbery chunks. But You can see the case internally is not blackened, so it doesn't look like it's been burnt. This is just old oil. Maybe some water came in through that broken starter motor hole. You can see internally that starter motor hole doesn't look nearly as bad as it does externally. This is the towel pushed in from the crank conrod, piston exposed. So all of that looks fairly good. There's holes right down through here into the other parts of the transmission, right down through there. So and bolts here that hold the transmission halves together. That's a little pin there for the spring on the detent for the selector hub. I need to turn this upside down to let all of that shit drain. What I'm going to do is put a block of wood across here and a block of wood across here, and they actually suggest in the book that you make a little frame up that holds those two pieces of wood in place and holds all these shafts off the ground, and with a bit of 4x2 here and a bit of 4x2 here and a little box, and then turn it up the other way. You've got a nice even base for it to sit on. Okay, I've tipped the motor over on the flywheel side and resting it on that oil pan, because a fair bit of that sludgy shit I still wanted to run out of it, and it's now got this side up and level. A bit easier to operate than it was before. Probably do a little bit more of a scratch around on this side before I start taking it off, but it's really just a series of bolts around the outside to get to it. And I've made up a box to sit underneath where that oil pan is, or when I'm working on the other side, which will create a nice level face that won't damage the aluminium where the gaskets go. I was going to turn it over and sit it up on that now, but there was too much oil and shit in there to do that. I didn't want to mess this up too much, and it's bound to get covered in grease, but and oil and dirty shit. But so the next job is to run the just going to run the 8mm impact screwdriver around all of these nuts and see what happens. I just wanted to run around the perimeter of this, taking note of where these clips are. I think that's all original, that clip. There's a clip on here, and then around this side there's a stud going through there that goes right through to the case. That's a 10mm dome nut that needs to be removed. I'll take that whole cover off, but that's one not to miss, and then I reckon it's going to be free. I think we've got a similar problem here removing this cover as I did with the other side, whereas this particular bolt runs down through a sleeve or a dowel pin, and that's why it's sort of a larger one than the one next to it there, you can see, and the others are smaller. This one's a bigger one. I think that reflects that there's a dowel pin in there, and I can tap all the way around the case, and I'm getting a little bit of lift. You see a bit of oil running out around these other sides because the gasket's broken, and you know, tapping in at various places, if you just put your finger across the joint you can feel the vibration that it's loose, but rather than force anything, this one's still binding, and so the whole thing is stuck on there. I've got 12 screws out, including this bolt here. There's 12 fastens around the perimeter. So I've put some yield in this hole, and it may work its way, because it's effectively a blind hole, it may work its way down and spew back around that dowel pin. If it doesn't, I'll give it a tap now. If it doesn't, I will use a MAP gas to heat this whole area to about 100 degrees. That's the sort of temperature spit will sizzle away on the surface, which means that the aluminium is expanded as much as it can. And when it's still hot, I might squirt a bit more yield in there and see whether as it cools it sucks the yield into the joint or something. Well, that did the trick. I heard it. I put a lever under this pin because there's no real space there to hit. I put a lever under there. I'd been trying to hit on it, but mainly sideways. And with the lever under there, I heard this release with a click, and so it's released all the way around now, and I'm sure it'll come off. Okay, I'm going to remove this centrifugal clutch. This nut here is a left-hand thread, so that can catch you out if you're trying to tighten it. I'm going to jam a rag between the gears on the other side, not this side, but around that side. That'll try. I've got to turn it that way with the thing to undo it. Jam a rag in there to suck a rag in and jam those two gears together. This is the mechanism that is operated when you press the gear shift right one way or right the other way. These little balls roll up a ramp on the end cover and push that pin down. That pin releases the clutch. So that piece just wants to come away straight away when you remove the end cover there. It's that nut there that you can get in through the end of the case to adjust the clutch pressure. So yeah, first things first, I'm going to release that. I've released the nut, and that's the center of the centrifugal clutch with its three shoes that fly out when the revs build up. I've undone that. This is the little piece that presses on the center of the standard clutch. This lever here, which is operated by the gear shift itself and runs right through the box, it pulls right out. You'll see that that's the spline on the end of it where the 5-speed gears connect to. It clocks backwards and forwards here, in there, like that, operating this mechanism through here, which rotates a barrel which selects the 5 speeds. So there's no connection to this as such, like selector forks or anything attached directly to that gear shift. It operates the clutch, and it operates the mechanism for rotating the barrel, which has the selectors connected to the barrel there, which we'll get to in a moment. So this cup pulls out, but I need it there. I've also released the center of the clutch here. They were under spring tension. I've released that out of there. There's the springs, and that exposes a 27mm nut in the middle there. And the reason I'm showing you all this now is I had to backtrack a little bit because to get that nut undone, which is a normal right hand thread, you've got to have this cup in place so you can jam a rag in between the gears here to be able to undo that, because you're going to turn it in that direction. I think there's a Sprag clutch in there as well, which is making it difficult to turn, but that's the next thing I'm going to do. I sort of reverted back. I got ahead of myself and I knew I hadn't shown you anything, so I'll now going to release this, and that whole clutch basket can come away, and that cup just lifts off as well. This is the oil pump here. It's driven by a cog on the crankshaft there that's just pinned to the crankshaft with a little pin in that side there. This is the input shaft to the gearbox that the clutch main clutch was on. This mechanism here is complex in that it operates, that's a barrel that turns around for when you're changing gears. This lever here is just a detent. There's 5 positions that's happy to be in. The lever moves one way, it pulls in one direction or pushes in the other, and moves the gears up and down, and it's related back to this. That's where the lever comes through here, and it clocks this. Because I've got that lever out at the moment, you can't see how that really works, but I thought I'd make this little bit of video so that I've got a better show of putting it back together later. I've just removed the 3 screws from that little Mikuni oil pump after removing the sprocket, the gear from it. The gear's actually keyed to the shaft, so you see that slot in the shaft there. It retains a little pin, and the whole lot's held on by a circlip. Now the screws that held that down are Phillips head, and I severely mangled that one getting it out because the Phillips impact bit spun in it, and then I had to use a centre punch to get it to turn. Another one there I think is also a little bit damaged. One of them seemed to come out okay, which is probably that one. So 2 of those screws I'll have to replace, and then these littler screws here held the barrel in place over here. These are in either side there, and I got those to come out. It's a good idea to hit the head of these screws downwards with a Phillips head screwdriver, or the metal part of the impact driver. Belt them down to loosen them up a little bit before you try and turn them. And I did that to those last 2 and one of these, but I damaged 2 of the others. So now I'm going to just take this little Mikuni oil pump out, and there's a screw in the bottom of it that enables you to take that apart. I don't think we need to do that. You can see the little mechanism inside that, and you can give it a spin. If there's any metal and stuff around, you probably need to replace these pumps. But anyway, I'm going to put the gear back on top with the pin through the hole in the shaft, and the circlip on, which will keep it. There's the hole in the shaft there, which will keep all of that together, and saves me losing the circlip and the tiny pin. I'll move on. I've got it back with the transmission flywheel side up to drain some of the oil out of the clutch side, and I've dabbed around inside the case there just with a paintbrush, picking up a little bit of oil on the brushes and making it, wiping it off on the edge of the drip pan below. and I've cleaned it out, and through the whole process I haven't really found any metal in it. I've checked the oil filter and there's no metal in the oil filter. Look, the case isn't burnt on the inside. Yeah, if I use a bit of solvent now, I think I'll get it back looking brand new on the inside, so pretty happy with that. I'm going to transfer the whole motor across to my blocks of wood here now. Take it off the oil. Probably going to drip oil all over my blocks of wood overnight, but yeah, it gives me a chance to empty the oil pan. I'm going to leave today's work with that sitting nice and flat on my blocks. Crankshaft there rotates nice. It's got no side to side movement or up and down movement, and although there's a little bit of crunching happening on, probably a couple of specks of dirt got into the bearings just while we've been playing. That feels fine, so that crank seems all good. Gearbox shafts, all of the bearings I've fiddled with seem okay. Rear axle bearings got no play in it. The clock like that is just the internal gears, backlash in the internal gears. The odometer that I found for this bike, I assume it's for this bike, had 7,000 kilometres on it. Now, who knows whether that's right or whether it's been disconnected for 10,000 kilometres, who knows. But look, you can see down the side here, the advantage of the blocks of wood is that it supports the casing face evenly. It's wood, so it doesn't damage it, and means you can thump on it a bit better than sitting on a plastic bucket. And yeah, sure, there's going to be more oil run out of it overnight and mess that wood up a little bit. You can turn this whole case over the other way because there's bolts coming in from both sides when you're separating the crank case down the centre line. That'll be the job tomorrow, so I'll sign off for today. So get out to your shed and have some fun yourself.